Hey everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay. I'm very bad with microphones, so I'm just using this for the first time in my life. Clicker. Thank you. I knew I was missing something. Okay, so today we're going to spend a bit of time to talk about when innovation fails and some of the things we could do to make sure it happens less in the future. But before talking about that, a bit about myself. I'm Dan, and I am a product designer. I've been designing for 20 years now, I guess. I spent most of my career in London, where I led and managed design teams at companies such as Farfetch, Just Eat, and Fresha. And being a designer, my day looks something like this. I go between intense happiness and intense pain on a daily basis. Being a designer is great, but it's also very frustrating at times, and I'm sure you can all relate to at least some of those things. I run a very small design studio called Rubber. We are a team of, an intentionally small team of designers and engineers and researchers that works with companies such as, if this thing is working, yeah, we have internet issues, so some GIFs might not load. We're working with companies such as Wonderbly and Get Your Guide and Multiverse to help them become more innovative. I spend quite a bit of time on Twitter. I should post about a lot of stuff, so if you're into that, just feel free to follow me here. And I know Elon Musk is very happy with me plugging Twitter because it's not going too well at the moment. He seems very happy. And I'm still half asleep. I'm not a morning person. I'm very bad at doing talks in the morning, so bear with me. I got this. OK, let's talk a bit about innovation. I think people have this mystical definition of what innovation is. It's like a magical thing that just happens. When in reality, it's a bit more simple than that. If you look at the definition in the dictionary, it's a radically new idea, method, or device, and it's not to be confused with invention. And if we look at the real-life scenario for that, the person who created the first phone, the person that came up with the idea of two people talking to each other without being in the same room, they're an inventor. They came up with that idea because they had a need for it. And they just did it. But the person that took that idea and turned it into a mobile device or a smartphone, they are an innovator. They took an idea that existed and they tried to make it better. And I think that's a good way of looking at innovation. It's not this magical thing that just happens. It's just taking something that exists and making it better than it was before. So if you look at that, it's a bit more simple. It's less intimidating to think about how to be innovative. Innovative could be a checkout flow that's done differently than all of your competitors. It could be many, many things like that. It doesn't have to be a very big, bold thing. But generally, when a company starts growing, they stop innovating. And I don't think there's anyone to blame for that. When you're a small startup, a lot of the times, you are innovative by default, simply because there's no way to get investment. There's no way to grow unless you innovate. But once you start growing, you do a bit less of that because it's risky. You just try to focus more on business as usual. And once again, there's no one to blame for that. You can't really pinpoint and say, this is the reason why we're not being innovative. In many companies, there are many different reasons. But it just happens. And I'm sure people that have worked in large organizations can feel that. A lot of the times, it's just business as usual and very small iterations. So to explain a bit more about that, I'm going to share a story from my time with Just Eat. In 2014 or 2015, I joined the Just Eat design team to lead them through their growth. We were facing some very interesting times. We were getting ready for an IPO, which meant we had to show that we're growing very, very fast. At the same time, we had a lot of startup competition. Companies like Deliveroo and Uber Eats, which were very small at that point, they were doing an incredible job. They had much better features than us. They were shipping things faster. We were just lacking behind, although we were the biggest one in Europe at that point. So after I joined Just Eat, I started working with the leadership team to try and figure out what we can do as a business to become more innovative. Just coming up with a list of very big, bold ideas or bets that would turn us into, I guess, a company that couldn't be fucked with, a company that our competitors couldn't easily bypass. So we did all of those things that you would expect. We ran discovery sessions, customer interviews, focus groups. We looked at data. We did all of those things. And in the end, we had that list of radical features. We were very, very happy about it. We were very excited to have that list. We felt like if we do even half of the things on this list, we would be an incredible company. We felt godlike. We felt incredible. And by the way, I'm going to have a lot of Succession gifts. If you haven't watched that, go home this weekend and watch Succession. It's incredible. And then, of course, once we had that list and we were happy with it, we started sharing it with everyone. We went to the other designers, to the other PMs, engineers, and we said, hey, this is it. This is what we should be doing as a business to be amazing. And the answer we got from them was, yeah, we know that. Everyone in the company knew about all of those things. They knew them. They just never went live. And that was incredible and frustrating at the same time, because how come you know about all of these things, yet none of them are live? So of course, we kind of took a step back and tried to figure out why it happens. And we realized that most companies have folders of great work that never sees the light of the day. I haven't invented this quote. It's from someone at Barclays, I think. I just don't attribute it to me. I stole it. I don't know who that person is. And we started looking into why haven't we shipped anything. And we found three main reasons. One, some of those things were explored as very primitive releases, as MVPs, and never touched again. Like someone in the company had this great idea. They went to their team and talked about it. It was really big, so they were like, hey, let's just ship something small now. And they've done that. They shipped it. But then it just stayed in that position for a very long time until it was deprecated or not improved. Which is a shame, right? You have so many great ideas and just ship this MVP and then they get lost. The second reason was they were explored and dismissed because of too many constraints. Once again, a person had this incredible idea. They shared it with their team. They started talking about it. They might do a bit of design exploration or even like usability testing. But then it was too hard to ship. There were too many things engineering-wise that were making that thing unshippable, which is, once again, a shame. And the third reason, which is the one that's the most frustrating to me, they were never explored because they were too crazy to even try. Someone had this incredible idea. They went to the business, and the business was like, nope, we're not going to do that. It's too big, too bold. No one's doing it. We're not going to do it. And yet companies are complaining about not being innovative, but whenever they see a big, bold idea, they're like, nope, which is, once again, a shame. But if you think about it from a people's perspective, I'm sure there's more behind that. So we started digging even deeper and trying to figure out what happens in people's minds or in a particular team as a consequence of that. So really, why haven't we shipped anything? So on the people side, I've noticed that at Just Eat particularly, we had an adversity to risk. As a traditional product squad, your goal is to minimize risks as much as possible. So whenever you are facing a problem or a challenge, instead of kind of bypassing that and pushing through it, a lot of the times you stop. You're like, yeah, this is risky. We're just not going to do it. The second reason is internal politics. Most teams are very busy keeping the light afloat, and I'm sure many people can relate to that. A lot of the times, you have to make sure that the company doesn't die. You don't have to make sure it's growing rapidly, although that's kind of being told by the company. The idea is you have to keep the lights on, which is, once again, kind of a very big blocker for innovation. And the third one is there's an emphasis on constraints. All teams have constraints, especially engineering ones or operational ones. And when you're hyper aware of those constraints, it's very hard to think beyond them. It's very hard to be like, well, there is something we can do about that problem if we invest enough resources in it. Which is, once again, a very, very big shame. And I know this is a hot topic and very debatable, but my opinion is that the typical product squad is not designed for innovation. It's designed for business as usual. In a typical product squad, most of the things you do are kind of the same thing over and over again in very small iterations until you get somewhere. And once again, I'm sure people are going to disagree with me, but it's something I truly believe in, and I've seen it in many, many companies. But how do companies actually innovate? How do they get from, I know, this very big idea into actually making it a reality? There's this thing called the innovation scale. Well, there isn't. I just invented it. But it's called the innovation scale. And most companies have small commitments and huge commitments. And if you think about this idea of small commitments, you have stuff like Google's 20% time. Google employees have 20% of their time to just work on anything they want that would help the business grow. And it's great. And projects like Gmail and Google News and many other things came out of that. So they made a lot of money by allowing people to do those things. You have stuff like hackathons, like the move fast and break things thing from Facebook that's not going too well at the moment. They had hackathons where employees had 2 days or 3 days per quarter to do whatever they wanted. And they got things like the like button and many, many other features that you see in the Facebook app now were part of a hackathon at some point. And then you have design sprints. I'm sure you've all done that at some point in the past. I think they're great. There's a book about it as well. There's a clock that you can buy to help you with design sprint. I mean, it's incredible. They were popularized by Google Ventures. I think they're great, but generally all of these small commitments have downsides, of course. They are short bursts. It's just like 1 or 2 days every few months. They rarely end up in real work. A lot of the times, unless you put in additional investment, which usually means a typical product squad, they're not going to go live. And most of the times fail. They fail because of the lack of time. There's a clear lack of focus in that. And then we have these massive commitments, like Apple's prototyping team. Apple has a part of their office that's called the prototyping team, where a few people work, and they just do whatever they want to help grow the business. And it's not just exploring them and doing discovery. They actually ship those things. And things like Apple Pay came out of that. Things like the Control Center, Siri came out of that as well. So many, many great things are part of that team. And they're actually the team in Apple that innovates more than anything else. Of course, all of the other teams are kind of innovating and trying to do that, but that's their main focus. Once again, the videos are not working, but you can Google them. Farfetch had a team called Store of the Future that I was also part of for a bit, where they essentially looked at how would the Store of the Future, the luxury Store of the Future, look like. They were looking at stuff like smart mirrors and the shop floor app, where you would know the customers that are coming in and what they like and what they don't like. And this was great, and they were actually doing some pretty innovative things. And then you have stuff like Airbnb's Samara team. I hope that's how you pronounce it. This is a separate department within Airbnb that's innovating. And initially, they were looking at things like smart devices for hosts, where they would greet their guests, and cameras and all of those things. Lately, they went a bit deeper into even stuff like soap. Lately, they went a bit deeper into doing tiny houses that you can put in your backyard and rent on Airbnb, which is a pretty good idea if you ask me. But all of these things are huge commitments. They cost a lot of money. You have to employ many, many people to do those things. Sometimes they're out of touch with the core product. Sometimes, because they sit outside of the product teams, they kind of fail to relate to the challenges that product teams have. And a lot of the times, the work they do goes back into the additional squads, which by default kind of more or less squashes innovation. So big, bold idea that's validated. This is it. It goes into a product squad, and they're like, well, we can't really ship this, so let's just minimize it. But what if I told you there was a middle ground? What if I told you there was another way of doing things, which isn't a small commitment and a huge commitment? And I'm sure there are other ways, but this is one I've experimented with quite a bit, and I know it pretty well. Enter. Ooh. Innovation Task Force. What is an innovation task force? Well, it's a temporary innovation team whose sole focus is to solve a problem in new and interesting ways. So instead of having just hackathons and design sprints and all of those small things that rarely end up in real work, or having a massive, massive team that just focuses on that, what if there's a middle ground? What if there's something you can do in your company that's kind of in the middle of that? But how does it work? I'm going to go back to Just Eat because I feel like it's easier to understand it from kind of a real-life example. A few months have passed since we showed that list of incredible ideas, and nothing really changed. We kind of tried to ship things in a traditional squad. We kind of tried to get some of those ideas through the design funnel and ship them, and it didn't really work. It wasn't working well. We also tried stuff like hackathons and design sprints. They were a very good start, but nothing got shipped. Nothing got shipped the way it was supposed to be shipped. And we said, hey, we have to do something. We have to do something about it. We're not going to survive. I mean, Deliveroo and Uber Eats are doing very, very well, and they're going to catch up to us, and we're going to be dead, which is not great for a business. So we started working on that. The first thing we've done was try to find a very big problem within the business. What's one of the biggest problems that's holding the business back? What's something that a traditional product squad is struggling to ship? We just looked within the company and we said, hey, what are the things we know we should be doing, and if we don't do them, we're dead? And why are they not happening? And that problem for us was a problem called Help Me Choose. We had a huge influx of customers downloading the app or going on the website and not placing an order. And based on the research we've done in the past, we knew that most of the reasons they do those things is analysis paralysis. We were having a lot of choice for a takeaway delivery service, and they were just struggling to find a dish or a restaurant that they were excited about. And then we kind of took a step back and we tried to figure out, what do we really need to fix it? What's the thing we could go to the business with and say, hey, if we give us this, we're going to be able to do it? Well, first off, an end-to-end team. And I think end-to-end team is very, very important. It wasn't just designers or a designer and a PM. It was an actual fully fledged design team, product team. So design, engineer, research, product management, data, and so on. We thought that if we have 3 months of intense focus, so no squad work, no, hey, there's this thing you need to do quickly, there's this other project that just came up, just focusing on that, we're going to be able to fix it, or at least make progress towards fixing it. And very, very importantly, we had to make it very clear that we're expecting failure. We weren't expecting to be successful. We hoped for progress and success, but by default, we went to the leadership team and said, hey, this might fail. We have no idea if it's going to work, but trust us, it's still going to be better than not doing anything. And then we tried to get buy-in. We went to the exec team. We explained what's wrong, and we had kind of the data to prove that. We looked at the big business problem. We looked at the numbers. We proposed some potential solutions that we kind of looked into in the past. And we asked them for 3 months. We said, hey, give us the ability to pick a team, give us 3 months to lock ourselves in a room, and let's see what happens. And of course, we were nervous. We went there and we said, hey, this is not going to go well. They're not going to accept. Like, who is going to give you these many resources to spend 3 months in a room to work on innovation? No one's going to do that. But they said yes. They were like, hey, I mean, we kind of have to do it anyway at some point, so maybe let's just try and do it now, which was great news for us. But then kind of the hard part started. We said, let's find the best people and put a team together. So generally, we looked for people who were frustrated about the problem or very excited about the domain. We had people that were facing the same challenge within the team. They weren't necessarily working on the menu or the restaurant page. They could be in B2B. It didn't really matter. If they were frustrated with that problem, they felt like a good fit for this team. We wanted to find people that don't know the constraints. So we looked for people that were fairly new within the business or people that weren't really working on that particular domain. And we wanted to find people who are not biased by the current business. If someone has been in a company for a very, very long time, there's a very high chance they've seen it all, and they weren't necessarily relevant for this particular team. They were doing an incredible job as part of their squad, but they weren't relevant for this team because it was very hard for them to be like, well, everything is possible. No, they knew that some things might not be possible or it's going to be very hard to do them. And we had a team. We had a team together of multiple engineers, designers, researchers, and so on. And we locked ourselves in a room. This sounds crazier than it really is. It's just like having a meeting room where you lock yourselves in and you just work from there instead of being in the rest of the office. We created a no disruptions environment. Sorry. So no one could kind of disturb us with a task or with a question. We're like, hey, 3 months, we're just going to be doing this. Nothing else is important for us. We had this no bad ideas mentality. If there was an idea that seemed crazy, the first thing we did was try to validate that. It wasn't like, no, no, we're not going to do that. We did like very crazy things, like a 3D menu, and all of those things that seemed crazy initially, but from those, like, a lot of great ideas came up. And of course, we only had 3 months, and we had to ship stuff as well. It wasn't just about doing design that sits in a folder. So we wanted to work very fast and validate quickly. We had research sessions and usability testing or concept testing on a weekly basis, just throwing stuff at people and seeing how they react to it. And we've done a lot of stuff. We did things that our competitors did not have at that point, like dish images, which seems crazy now, but at that point, no one in Takeaway had that. Just giving very accurate representation on when your food is going to get there, looking into numerous categories, improving reviews and making them very appealing and very interesting, and so on. And I know it sounds crazy, but it worked. We locked ourselves in the room, we started doing all of those things, and in the end, we shipped a lot of stuff. Like, a lot of things went live in those 3 months. And it was mind-blowing for the business once they've seen that, simply because things were taking much, much, much longer, and they were much smaller. And of course, it was risky. I mean, we could ship stuff and just break things. Like, conversion could go down massively. But the business accepted that, and they were, hey, if we don't try it, it's never going to work. So let's just see how it goes. And once again, this wasn't a small business. There was a company, like the biggest takeaway delivery service in Europe at that point. So there was like massive, massive risk. Once again, it just worked. But once we've done that and we realized it's working, we try to figure out why. Like, what happened? What made this work? And it's not very, very complex. Generally, in this innovation task force, if you create this environment, taking risks becomes the job. The goal in an innovation task force is to validate big, bold things, validate them very quickly, and turn them into shippable features. And when that becomes the job, when you know that your job is to risk, your job is to fail, then it's encouraged by default. You're not going to feel like you're crazy for trying out a new idea or for trying to ship something that's weird. When you have fresh eyes, you have fresh results. Because we were looking for those people that were kind of outcasts, people that weren't working on that domain, or people that were very new within the business. Actually, one engineer in our team, on their second day, they joined the squad, which was incredible because they had no idea what the code base is. They didn't know anything about Just Eat at that point. But because we got those kinds of people, we had a fresh perspective. It was still influenced by internal knowledge. We were talking to people within the business, and we were still having conversations with people that worked on menu and the search results page. But it was challenged by these new findings, by these new people that have this maybe new vision for what the product could be. And because we had no distractions, there was possibility. We never had to stop to do something else. We never had to take a step back because there's this small fire we have to put out. We never had to do any of those things. We weren't distracted by constraints and endless tasks. And actually, just thinking about that time, besides the design review weekly meeting, there were no meetings. Like 3 months with no meetings was like incredible. And I'm sure you can all relate to that. You have so much more time to just do stuff. So we got creativity out of that. Because we had no distractions, we were able to be creative and just try new things. But the last thing, this innovation task force was small enough to minimize costs, but large enough to make an impact. It was kind of this great middle ground for innovation because, once again, we tried things like hackathons, and we tried getting buy-in for an innovation squad. And of course, the company was like, no, we don't have money to do all of that. We have to IPO this year. We had to look for something that was kind of in between. And this task force, which was, once again, temporary, after these 3 months, the task force kind of dissolved, and people went into their own squads, and then we did another one 6 months later on another project. But that was, once again, small enough to minimize costs, but large enough to make an impact. And it just worked. We shipped a lot of stuff, and then that was a good lesson for the company that maybe a squad isn't the best place to be creative and be innovative. And whenever we need to do that, and there's a massive business problem, we have to think beyond the traditional squad. That was it. Thank you so much. I don't know if I took like 20 minutes or less. Yeah, that was it.